How's everyone doing? You just had coffee? So you're good? Awesome. I apologize, of course, for having to do this in English. Unfortunately, I haven't accommodated myself to your language yet. I learned yesterday, mañana, it's one word. Gracias is another word. So I'll be okay. So I hope that, feel free to let me know if I speak too fast or anything. I want to extend a thank you to Barbara and Alexandro for inviting me here. This is my first time in South America. Yeah? And I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much. So, and what an honor to come to a conference that brings different countries together to talk about innovation and entrepreneurship. These are some of my favorite topics, and this is so important that we look at this across borders. So big congrats to the organizers. I think this is so important what you're doing here. So thank you for inviting me. I'm definitely going to kind of come back. Unfortunately, I have to fly out just after my talk, but now I have a great excuse to come back, so I'm looking forward to that. I already fell in love with the wine and the people and, all these things. So thank you for that. I want to talk a little bit about the future. And when we talk about the future, a lot of us talk about the future looking like this, right? This wonderful utopia kind of world where everything is green. There's one thing missing in this picture of the future. What's always in this scenario of the future? Flying cars, right? Flying cars, exactly. They're always there in this scenario of the future. But sometimes we also talk about the future looking like this, right? What's in this version of the future? Bad robots, did somebody say that? Well, you're right. Like the Terminator scenario, the bad AI taking over the world, right? Well, so here's the thing, and this is why I'm excited about entrepreneurship and innovation, right? I think that the future we create, whether it's going to be the first or the second of these scenarios, basically depends on what challenges we want to face today, right? What is it that we get up in the morning and spend our time on, right? Even in this, fast-paced world, we still only have 24 hours a day. And what do we spend those 24 hours on? Well, we have to sleep, still, right? Waiting for the pill to take that away. That'll be smart, right? More effective. But we have to sleep and we have to eat and those other things. And so what do we really spend our time on? It's a very, very crucial question that we should ask ourselves, right? And let me give you an example. So you can spend your time on doing something like this. I hope nobody in this audience made it. If you did, I'm sorry. So this is the iBeer app. So say you're the designated driver of a party. You can use this app and you can pretend to be drinking, and it also burps. So really, really smart people, creative people, wonderful entrepreneurs created this, right? Or you can spend your time on this, which is the Tooth Fairy app. Do you have this thing in South America where if your child loses a tooth, you put it under the pillow and you get money? Yeah. Well, so this is an app that allows parents to kind of figure out how much they should put under the pillow. And I mean, those two things solve problems, sure. But is it really big problems? So you can spend your time on this, or you can spend your time on this. This is basically the world, UN sustainability goals, right? This is basically the world coming together and say, we have these massive challenges in the world. How about we spend our time working them out? Right? So at Singularity University, we talk about the global grand challenges, and you can draw some sort of a parallel to the UN sustainability goals. We call them global grand challenges, so basically big challenges in the world. We also think that these challenges basically present the biggest opportunities we have. Because if you as an entrepreneur or as a big corporation solve some of these problems, you're going to have a pretty good business, right? We also have space in there because that's kind of the organization we are. But so I want to think about, look at, the massive problems that we have. And I think Laila which, by the way, how funny is it? You have a conference and you bring in 2 female speakers from around the world, and one is called Laila and the other one is called Laila. I mean, we kind of talked about this yesterday, that maybe the organizers, they just looked at a speaker bureau and they took L. And then they said, let's bring them. No. But that was kind of funny. So anyway, Laila also talked about, being a problem lover, right? Looking at problems and really using that as a catalyst to create change. So if we look at some of these challenges, sometimes I get a little bit depressed, right? Because I have over here wonderful glass of water somebody put out here for me. And I've actually never in my life had to wonder where my next glass of water came from, ever. It was just there, right? But that's not how it is for the entirety of the world. I mean, almost 2 billion people drink basically toilet water, right? Think about that. We've also come a long way. I mean, we have done a lot to these massive challenges, right? We've actually cut the extreme poverty rates in more than half. However, this is still a real picture. Right? So there's still some way to go. There's still some challenges to be made, right? We've also, when I grew up, everybody talked about hunger. I don't know if you are also familiar with that, but that's what I saw on TV. I saw these massive problems with hunger. Now, actually, we're in the position in the world where more people die from eating too much and wrong than eating too little. Right? It's a massive global challenge. 40% of all adults are overweight. Right? It's a massive thing, right? And still, we have all this food that Laila was also talking about that we throw out, right? In a country like mine, it's 700,000 tons of food every year. And my country is the size of Santiago. So it's massive numbers, right? And sometimes when I look at these global grand challenges, I kind of feel like this, kind of feel like I have to put this square down this round hole. And how am I ever going to be able to change any of that? But the good thing is I'm really an optimist. And remember those 2 pictures I showed you in the beginning? I think that we have a bigger chance of going to this than the other. And I'll tell you why. It has to do with this. And we're going to go back to math for a little while. Are you going to be good with that? You just had coffee, so I think you're going to be good. Yeah? Okay. So it has to do with this gentleman sitting up in the corner. His name is Gordon Moore. Does that ring a bell to anyone? Yeah? So a few people. Moore's Law basically says something about the computer power doubling every 18 months. For those of you that does not ring a bell to, I'll tell you why that's important. So it has to do with, if you look at your cell phone, basically it can do a lot more. The second you bought it, it's already old, and you're like, you want the new version because the pictures are so bad now, and those things. Have you ever tried to look at a cell phone that's just 3 or 4 years old? It's really weird, right? Because it just doubles so fast. Technology moves so fast. And that's, if you take nothing else away from this talk, this next part is important, okay? So we're going to go through this. So Laila actually also talked about linear, right? Linear, if we go back to school, linear is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So if I take, I'm going to go this way. If I take 30 linear steps, how far do I go? Yeah, my step is about 1 meter, let's say that. 30 meters, good. It's not a trick question, it's pure math. Okay, so that's the linear, that's the yellow line, right? That's how we think as people. Our brains think in a linear fashion, right? That's how it was 50,000 years out on the savannah, local and linear, right? The challenge is, because of Moore's Law and other things, technology moves at an exponential pace. Okay, exponential, back to school, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, yeah? Okay, so next question. If I take 30 exponential steps, how far do I go? To Denmark? Further, yeah. Somebody said far. That's the right answer. Far is really the right answer. 26 times around the planet. Okay, 26 times around the planet. Very big difference between a linear development and exponential development. So if we understand the notion of technology moves at an exponential pace, we'll try to figure out, and we can actually understand why we get surprised when technology suddenly disrupts whole new industries, right? We can create these massive changes based on technology, right? Because in the beginning, let me give you an example. How long have we had virtual reality? You know, the virtual reality, you put these things on and you kind of go into a different world. How long has that been around? Okay, so I've heard everything between 3 and 30 years, right? So big change here, or big difference, right? So the thing is, you're kind of both right, because it's true. VR, the technology, has been around for a long time. But in the beginning, it was so bad. And that's basically, if you look at the yellow line where the green one is underneath it, in the beginning, the technology is deceptive. It cheats us. We think it's going to be the next big thing, but it's really not. It just goes so slow because the doublings are not really, 1 to 2, 2 to 4. It's not really, it doesn't really matter. So the technology is deceptive, right? But then suddenly, you start doubling from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, it doesn't really matter. But when you start doubling from 100 to 200 to 400, then suddenly it goes fast. And that's why within the last 3 years, we've seen this massive deployment of VR technology all over the world. And you can now, buy the cardboard for VR, right? You can buy them for like $10. They used to be like thousands of dollars, right? So this is important to understand, that technology does not move in a linear pace, it moves exponentially, okay? And that's why, because of technology, we're going to be able to create that world that I was just talking about. We can actually solve some of these big problems through technology. And I'll kind of give you a little overview of where we're at with this. Okay, so this also means that all of this, looking out in the audience, I can see some of you will know what some of this is. Some of you will have no idea what a Walkman is. It's something cool. It's like an iPod thing we wore when, a long time ago. We had a tape and, yeah. Anyways, so all of this is now in your cell phone, just smarter, right? Yeah? And so if we look a little bit into the future, having this notion of exponential development within technology, let's kind of have a look at what's going to happen, right? So if we look at Wi-Fi, this is Google Loon, by the way. So Google X has this division where they kind of come up with crazy stuff. They call them moonshots, right? That's where they came up with Google Maps, which a lot of us use, right? Which is basically, imagine you were in this meeting. Hey guys, how about we take a car and then we just take a camera and then we literally just photo the entire world. Let's do that. Isn't that a great idea? Imagine being in that meeting and saying, sure, let's just do that and create Google Maps. Right? You kind of have to be a little bit mad to think that's a good idea. Right? Turned out to be a pretty good idea. Right? So anyway, Google also works in this other project, which is about providing internet access all over the world. Right? This is their project. They basically think, hey, let's put up these balloons up in the air and provide Wi-Fi everywhere. Facebook is working on these drone kind of ideas. Virgin is working on satellites. We don't know exactly who's going to win that race, but we know somebody is. So we're expecting that over the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to double the amount of people online. We're going to have 3 billion more people online. Just that one thing is disruptive for so many businesses. Because it's 3 billion more people that will purchase stuff, that will contribute with content. It's 3 billion more customers, but it's also 3 billion more potential competitors, right? And since we're going to purchase more and more online, it's really important to think about how am I digitizing my business, right? Because we know this is going to happen, right? We also know that we're already going to have these self-driving cars, right? Do you already have projects with self-driving cars in South America? Yeah, so I'm going to turn this off in a minute because you can't focus on what I'm saying. It's really hard. The thing is, we have self-driving cars is legal in 7 American states. We have projects with self-driving cars. self-driving trucks, even self-sailing boats, all over Europe as well, right? So this is coming, and we know that. So think about, if you want to future-proof your business, think about this exponential development. What is this going to mean to where we want to live? What is this going to mean to delivery? What is this going to mean to a whole bunch of things, right? All the time that we can spend on doing other things, right? And speaking of delivery, we also, these drones, that development is also on an exponential curve, which obviously means that you can have stuff delivered also to very rural areas within a relatively short period of time. And it's really interesting because we're now seeing countries. I understood a little bit of the introduction by the minister earlier. I try to read, and it's kind of like Latin and French, and I kind of understand a little bit of that, so I got a few words. But one of the things was about legislation and making it proactive and easier to be an entrepreneur, right? What's really interesting, if you look at some of the countries that has the most liberal drone industries or drone legislation, those are actually African countries. Why? Because they really need it. They don't have the road and the infrastructure, right? So maybe they will entirely skip the driving, right? And go straight to the drones. Kind of like what they did with phones, right? There was mobile payments in Africa way before there was mobile payments in Europe, right? Because they didn't have a banking system that was working, and it wasn't easy so they did it via mobile phones, right? So they actually inspired some of the banks in Europe, and you shouldn't think that, but that's actually how it was, right? So I have a friend who works in the drone industry, and I asked him, so how's business in the drone industry? And he said, well, it's interesting because we're not a drone company anymore. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, so because of the development, exponential development, what the drones can carry doubles all the time. Like he said something about every 4th month, right? So that means that they decided to not be a drone company that inspected bridges. They're now a flying car company. Because they're now in a position where these drones can carry people. So they changed their entire strategy, right? And now you're seeing things like this. So maybe the flying cars are actually coming. We don't know. We'll see. So anyway, this is also an interesting graph. So Moore's law, the one I just showed you with the doublings, is the white one. This is the price of sequencing the human DNA, right? So basically, we are all made of code, right? Our code is called DNA, and it has a different code, right? So when we first sequenced the human DNA, it took 13 years and cost $2.7 billion. Last year, the price got under $1,000, right? Massive decrease in price. Why is this interesting? It's interesting because we're now in a position where we know exactly what we're made of, right? And that's interesting because I want to know exactly what to eat based on my DNA. I want to know how I should sleep, how I should work out. I don't want a general advice. I want my advice based on my code. And the interesting thing is you can do that. There are companies like this one called Athogene. They were part of our accelerator program. And basically, they have done this. You can do a $200, like a mouth swab, and then they will tell you online in a secure manner how you should sleep, work out, eat based on your specific DNA. So the thing is, we're now in a position where we can customize everything to the individual person. Imagine what this means for healthcare. Right? Massive, massive, massive. We're also in a position, if you don't know about it, you should check out a tool called CRISPR-Cas9. Very, very super simplified. It's kind of copy-paste of DNA, which is interesting again, right? So anyway, let's move on. We're also in a position where we're not going to continue to be the ones that knows the most, right? We always think people are superior. Well, so here's a good example. There was this Japanese woman who had a rare type of cancer. They couldn't really figure out what it was. And so Watson, which is this supercomputer out of IBM, they gave Watson 20 million research papers to read in 10 minutes which it did, and then diagnosed this woman with this rare type of cancer and came up with a suggestion on how to treat her, and she's now doing better. How many of us can read 20 million research papers in 10 minutes? There's a couple over here, which you probably want to hire really fast. But it's just interesting, right? Because how many other things in our different jobs can a computer do better than us? And we need to start leveraging that to create the best businesses. Basically, we're moving into a time, if you look at artificial intelligence, where, any of you guys use Siri on your phone? Yeah, where you ask Siri, where is the venue for this? Yeah, and Siri answers back. Basically, it's the oracle, right? I ask a question, how's the weather today? And it tells me, right? We're now moving into the next phase where the AI will be like an agent that suggests things. Any of you guys do you use Netflix? Yeah? So interesting, 70% of everything you watch on Netflix is based on an algorithm because it suggests to you what you like. 70%, right? So the agent will suggest to you up front, like if you go on Amazon or anything else, you think, oh, they have amazing books here. Yeah, well, And if your business is not starting to use this, it should be, right? Because that's the next phase. Actually, the next phase again is that the AI will be like a sovereign. It will basically decide for us. So I'll give you an example. So I have a real assistant. Her name is Maria. She's wonderful. But I also have an AI assistant, right? And my AI assistant allows me to put my AI assistant CC on an email, say, let's have a meeting, right? And so last time I was in Palo Alto, my AI assistant set up a meeting with my friend's AI assistant. Think about this. Think about this. Basically, 2 AI assistants decided where me and my friend were going to meet. Not where, but when. Right? Really interesting. Right? That's kind of crazy when you think about it. And just a couple of years back, that would have been like sci-fi. But that's where we are. And this is working on an exponential curve, right? We're going to see so much more of this. Which is also why the whole notion, I understand that Chile is also looking into big data and all of these things. I think that's a great path to think about because this is going to be massive. So this is also an interesting picture, I think. Because Zuckerberg bought this Oculus Rift, by the way, which is a startup. Guy did it in his garage and, sold it for $1.8 billion. So he did a pretty good business. By the way, he crowdfunded it, of course. So we're going to see a lot of things happening within VR. Right now, we're kind of at the gadget state. We haven't really figured out what to do with it. But I think we're going to see, just like what we did with the websites. When we went to mobile, we had to figure out how to change the websites into something mobile, right? Because it's a different platform. We're now seeing the same shift happening into virtual reality. What's the virtual reality strategy? Like the mobile strategy. Like way back when, some of you remember, first time we had to have a web strategy. Like, okay, we're not just on brochures, we're actually online, then the mobile, and then VR, right? Because you can do a lot of things in VR. I personally, I'm a strong believer in augmented reality and mixed reality. Right? So VR is when you put something on and you go into this universe. Augmented reality is where the reality is still here, but you put an extra layer on it. And this is an example. It's constructed, but if you imagine this 5th graders learning about whales, right? I don't know about you guys, but did it just get like way cooler to learn about whales than when we were in school? But I mean, imagine when we move on from this. Again, exponential development. This might be a constructed scenario, but where is it going to be in just 3 or 5 years, right? It's a massive. And that also means, a lot of us are going to do in 10 years not what we're doing today. And definitely, how many people have kids in here? Yeah. If your kids ever ask you the question, Mom or Dad, what do you think I should be when I grow up? I hate that question because I have no idea. But the thing is, when you think about it, we also did not know when we grew up. I didn't know that I could be an app developer. Nobody told me about that when I was in school. Or a search engine optimizer. You know, all these jobs didn't exist. And yes, we are going to have probably a lot of people that are going to be unemployed. But we need to think ahead, right? Which is why education, I've heard about educating all of the entrepreneurs. We need to educate all the corporates as well. They need to also go through this because otherwise they're not going to be around, right? And all of the governments and everything. So this whole notion of filling this, gap of introducing people to some of the things in the future, right, is extremely important. And have this technological, engagement or enthusiasm is important, right? Actually, I think countries like the ones that you all represent, I think are going to have massive advantages in this new future. We're going to have virtual immigration, where you can basically perform a job here that takes place in some other country. It would be way smarter for all of us to hire somebody here for a lot of reasons. Wages being one, but you have, great education as well. I know you're working also on some of the things. In a minute, we're not going to need language anymore because we can just translate directly, right? So you guys are going to have massive opportunities, right, to really leverage all of that. So the good thing is there's never been a better time to start a business. Yay. The enthusiasm is overwhelming in the room, but that's good news, guys. This is great, right? Because we have an opportunity. I mean, we can crowdfund. By the way, let me give you numbers on global crowdfunding and see if you can identify a pattern. 3 billion, 7 billion, 16 billion, 32 billion, and last year, the number for crowdfunding surpassed venture capital. Right? What's the graph? How does it look like? Exponential, right? It's really interesting because we're now in a position where startups don't necessarily need venture. Doesn't mean that they can't use it. They can, and it's good, and we should have it, right? For many reasons, which I'll get back to. But we now are in a position where you can validate a market, yeah? And go out as an entrepreneur, and you basically don't need the bank, and you don't need the VC. Changes the entire game, right? Which also should get all the banks up and, off their chairs and kind of think, hey, we need to also be in this game, right? Because these new startups are our potential customers. So what do we do to be attractive to the startups, right? There's a lot of things that's happening. So we're actually seeing a lot of unicorns. What does unicorn mean in startup language? $1 billion valuation, $1 billion valuation, right? They actually called it a unicorn because in the beginning, it was so hard to be a unicorn. And there were so few, they were so rare that they called it a unicorn. Now this is the unicorn club, how it looked, right? So you see a pattern? Not so hard anymore. Well, actually, it's still harder to become a unicorn than it is to, be struck by lightning. But you see a pattern here. There are a lot of these unicorns, right? And they're coming up all over the place, right? And actually, I'll give you another number that's kind of scary. So this is a graph that shows how long it takes companies to go from the very first investment they got till they had a valuation of $1 billion. So remember the whale that I showed you? The company is called Magic Leap. It took them 258 days from the first money they received till they had a valuation of $1 billion. So I know companies and governments where it takes more than 258 days to decide whether they should have an innovation strategy seminar. It's not you guys, of course. You're like, you're the front runners, right? But there's a lot of companies where, we simply cannot take 3 years to validate something. It's just too long in this world, right? We need to move faster. And that can be a little bit scary, right? For some companies, especially if you're a legacy organization, you've been around for a while, you kind of see this pattern, you're like, whoa, we need to move, right? Good news for the startups, not so much for the legacy organizations, right? So here's what I think we should do. I'll give you a couple of sort of insights in terms of the ecosystems, right? And also, which is why I think some of the things that you guys are doing are quite remarkable. And then I'll give you sort of the secret sauce afterwards, yeah? So first of all, we need to create these strong ecosystems. And let me just say what I mean with ecosystem. Ecosystems is not, over here are all the startups. Over here are all the corporates, and they have their own ecosystem. And over here is the government. What we really need to do is create these ecosystems that are interdependent. And that's some of the things that in Scandinavia we worked really hard on and have been rather successful with. And what has worked has been that everybody could kind of see why it was smart for them to be part of it, right? So the startups basically want to connect with customers, VCs, right? We have all the corporates that are kind of getting to the notion of, hey, we need to tap into the startup ecosystem, otherwise we're going to miss the train, right? We need to be on this train. And we have the government that are kind of looking into, hey, what are the new things that we need to create regulations for, right? Because it's really hard to be proactive on this. You kind of need to know about what's going on. How do you regulate for sharing economy, for example? That's hard. That's a whole new way of thinking, right? We need all of the academia to be part of this as well. All of the students need to be able to tap into the startups, become interns, right? We need all of these different things to play together. The VCs need to be part of it. And so the reason why these ecosystems are so important is because they help everybody, right? So one of the reasons is obviously it creates awareness and branding, right? So I had the opportunity yesterday to meet the founder of Startup Chile. And let me just give a heads up to that. I thought that was strike of genius, what you guys did. Everybody in Europe, in my startup ecosystem, everybody knows about Startup Chile. That's pretty cool, because you're like halfway around the world, right? So that was the notion of several entities coming together and thinking about how can we create this ecosystem, right? So it creates this awareness and branding, but also for the individual company. Right? Whether you're the corporate that is part of it and helping to fund it, or you're the startup that can say, hey, I'm part of this ecosystem, right? It also creates massive access to talent, right? Which is one of the biggest problems for startups is access to talent, because they spent way more time on recruiting than they really needed to. It's so hard to find these good people, and you take a long time, and the team is what makes the company. So it's so important that we support with creating this talent, right? Obviously, we've seen and we've done research on this. Actually, startups that are part of an ecosystem have easier access to funding, right? Their startups get funded more often. Also, interestingly, corporates that tap into an ecosystem actually makes more investments, right? Which is also interesting, right? Because they know then they find them. So here's a very important thing. Very often when we talk about startups, we talk about giving them funding. Here's the thing. That's a good idea, but if a startup could choose between getting funding and having to give up equity and getting a ton of customers, what would they choose? Customers. Why? Because it makes a sustainable business and they don't have to give up their fund or give up their equity, right? So what is it that we do as an ecosystem to support startups, giving them customers? And as a corporate, think about how hard a startup will work for you if you are the first customer. They will go to the end of the world for you, right? Because they need that good case, right? They need your name to say this was the first client. They will work 8 times as much as any other, company that you hire to do the same job. Probably also for less money. So think about this. How can we think about creating customers, right? And then also, some of the things that we very often overlook is this whole notion of sense of community, right? We have this, sort of ecosystem that works. We also have a community. And that leads me to my last point in having these ecosystems. There are other things, of course, that are important, but this is one of them. So a lot of research has been done, and one of the most important, or actually they did a study also at Google, the most important factor for a team to have success was that the individual people had this psychological safety. Right? So if we want to create countries, ecosystems, cities, where people are comfortable with being entrepreneurial, and I mean that because you can also be entrepreneurial in a corporate or in a government, right? You're then an entrepreneur, is that we need to have a psychological safety. And that requires something from all of us as leaders, right? We have to accept that we have to experiment. And when we experiment, we will also sometimes fail, right? Which is generally not looked upon so well, but it's a thing, right? We have to find ways of how can we create a psychological safety for the people that are trying new things, right? We all have a responsibility in that. Okay, so I want to move on because I want to share with you the secret sauce. Yeah? All right, everybody raise your right arm all the way up in the air. All the way, as far as you can. Okay. And then give it 2 centimeters more. Okay, you can take your arm there. See, the thing is, when you're all tired and you think you have nothing more left, there's always that little extra. And that's what we're finding now for the last part. So I want to share with you the secret sauce. So the thing is, when you think about it, we're in this technological world, right? Knowledge is moving at exponential pace. I believe that the more technological our world becomes, the more human we also need to become. So I think the secret sauce to the future is having this unapologetic human perspective. It's about thinking about people, right? Because we all think we need to be able to code and everything. It's great if we can, but I don't think we all need to. But I think we all need to be able to understand people better than we do. And I'll give you a tool to do that. I'll also give you a few examples. And if you want, I can give you a download to an ebook that you can download free afterwards. So, okay, here's the notion. My daughter drew this. In Denmark, we have this saying that you have to hear the truth from children and drunk people. Once I said drunk children, and that was all wrong. But you know, apparently, you know, in my daughter's world, all men have beard, but I don't know. But the thing is, it's true. We're all different. However, we're all also human, and we have some fundamental wants and needs and motivations. And we basically spent about 15 years researching this, and you know, it's really hard to make something simple, but we have this simple model that you guys can use to sort of see what are those fundamental needs of people. You basically have to think about, none of us wake up in the morning thinking, today I want to be a worse person than I was yesterday. It's not how it works, right? We all want better, right? That's also why you're here, you know, learn stuff, meet new people. We all want better, right? That's humans, right? We're hardwired to want better. And there are 4 things that we want better at, and I'll share that with you. So I'll go through the models, and then I'll give you a few examples. One is from Chile, actually. So first of all, we all want to be better. And I don't know if you can see in the bottom, but it kind of has this halo on top of its head, right? So be better is about our values and our moral landscape, right? So I drive an electrical car, right? It's not a Tesla, it's one of the old ones. So I drive this electrical car, and every single time I go out in my car and this big SUV pulls up next to me, you know, I look at it and I just feel like such a good person. Right? I feel like I am personally saving the planet, right? It just makes me feel like I'm really a good person, right? And that's the feeling that we all really want. And I'm sure you have that feeling once in a while as well when you're I'm really a good mom, or a really good dad right now, or I'm a really good coworker, or I'm really doing something for the environment right now. Feel like you're a good person. We all want to have that feeling, right? And there are ways we can give that to people, right? We also want to do better. Do better is about skills, competencies, results, making something faster, better, stronger, right? So I fly a lot. Remember, you go to the airport and you have to go through these things? Yeah, what do people do? Yeah, they go under. Why do they go under? It's fast. How much faster is it really? Like a couple of seconds, right? But the thing is, our brain is old technology, right? Out on the savannah 50,000 years ago, right? Our brain didn't get an upgrade for like 50,000 years, right? So 50,000 years ago, out on the savannah, if that was a sable tiger over there, and I saved 2 seconds, I might save my life, right? So we're still thinking like that because we have old technology, right? So that's why we will save time, save money, and it's a really good driver of us, right? We also all want to feel better, right? Any of you guys own an Apple product? Yeah? No wonder they're doing well, huh? Yeah? So remember when you opened the box? Yeah. It took about 4 to 7 seconds because that's the time it takes for you to be emotionally attached but not annoyed. The thing is, how many of you guys saved the box? Why did you save the box? Right? It's just nice, right? You didn't save the big brown box from your TV, did you? No? There's always one person, an engineer, who did. And, anyways, but it's interesting, right? It has this sort of, it's just nice. So it's the emotional, right? It's the same when you go to a restaurant, they have candles on the table, right? It's not because we're cold. It's because, or we can't see anything. It's just nice, right? So that's the feel better, right? Feel better. We also all want to look better. And look better is not about how we physically look. Look better is about social status or social capital, right? So what happened out on the savannah 50,000 years ago if we were alone? We die. We would die. So we know today that if I'm alone, I'm not going to die. We know this. However, there is a correlation. There's actually a 26% increased risk that you'll die earlier if you feel lonely. Which is why, in a country like mine, 200,000 people feel alone. That's equivalent to 200,000 people in San Diego feeling alone. That's a disaster, right? Because we know that that influences how we feel. So look better is about that social capital. So what was the first thing I did when I got my electrical car? I posted it on Facebook. And then what happened? I got likes. Any of you guys posted on Facebook you're here today? No, not yet. We'll do it afterwards, of course. Yeah, so the thing is, or Instagram or whatever. But these are pretty normal things for us as human beings because it's a way for us to gain social capital. And it's a fundamental thing for all of us as human beings. And so what I'll do is I'll spend the last 10 minutes giving you a few ideas, and I hope that you can extract some best principles, not best practice of how these companies did it, but think about, what are the principles that apply in the examples that I'm giving, and how can you use those principles to adapt to your business, okay? So best principles. So let's look at Be Better. This is a company called Be My Eyes. They came out of our accelerator. And basically, they found out there are 285 million blind and visually impaired people in the world. And so they created a video app that allows you, if you're blind or visually impaired, they all use iPhones. You can connect to a volunteer somewhere in the world that speaks the same language as you and are in the same time zone. And if you're standing in the supermarket and this is pineapples on a can and tomatoes on a can, it's really hard if you're blind to figure out which one is which, right? But it matters if you're making spaghetti bolognese, right? So you can basically just push a button and there'll be a volunteer that does for free, allows you to find out which one is which one. So in 6 months, this company became the biggest community on the planet for blind and visually impaired people, right? The founder was a 56-year-old guy who was visually impaired, and he worked with another guy, 2 people. So really interesting. They get these things, like this is a Twitter feed they got, right? I just got my first Be My Eyes request. A man from Iraq needed help identifying his health and birth documents. I feel so fulfilled I could cry. So how many of your customers say that after having used your offering? I feel so fulfilled I could cry after having used this product. Right? And they even do this for free. Right? they give their time to do this just because it makes them feel that they're a better person. It makes them be better, okay? So what's the most interesting supermarket in the world, according to Washington Post? No. It's called WeFood. It's a little shop based out of Denmark, actually, that crowdfunded what they sell. And basically, or they crowdfunded the store. And what they sell is food that is close to expiration date. So they sell food that would otherwise have been thrown out in a week or so, right? They're already now crowdfunding the second store. It's really interesting. Every time you buy something in this store, which, by the way, is cheaper than anywhere else, right? You feel like you're personally helping to save the planet and reducing food waste, right? Makes you be better, right? So this is a local example. I went to a market. They're called Green Glass. I encourage you to check them out. So here's why I'm going to use them as an example going forward. So here's what they do. They take old wine bottles, right? And they have, among other, former prisoners, people that have a hard time getting jobs, right? And they help them collect these glasses, and they actually get a job out of this. And then they create these wonderful glasses with like fun text on it, and and I bought a whole bunch. Like I have a whole suitcase full of them, right? And I think it's such an interesting thing because every time I'll take this glass and drink from it, I'll not only remember Chile, but I'll remember that I helped create a job for somebody who had a hard time getting a job, and I recycle things that would otherwise have been thrown out. What a wonderful Be Better example, right? So we're actually also seeing this whole notion of B Corps. I understand that Chile is actually one of the countries that has the most B Corps. Yay, you. Really good. You should applaud yourself. That's awesome. Very cool. So if you're not familiar with B Corps, it's basically a way of registering your company saying, well, I want to, drive a profitable business, but at the same time, I want to do good. I want to contribute back to the society, which I think is such a wonderful thing to do. So I want to move on to Do Better. So Do Better is enhancing our skills, performances, results. So this is a Danish case, but I understand that you have one also here in South America. Tell me again, Barbara, what was the name of the food that gets, say it again? Did you hear that? I'm going to say it wrong. El Negrito? I have no idea if I'm saying that right. Okay, so basically the point is you order your food online. Here I think you have to call. But anyways, you order your food online and it gets delivered to your door. Right? I use this service all the time because it saves me a lot of time from going out and shopping. What I really want is that service to be combined with that service. Remember this? Yeah? So I get the food delivered, that's to my DNA. That's the next one, right? So here's another thing. Have you ever gone to a meeting where you wish that you knew exactly who the people in the room were? Yeah? It will be nice, right? So here's a service for you. It's called Crystal Knows. It's version 1. Imagine version 10. So it basically takes everything that's online, and it scrapes that, and it turns it into a personality profile. This is not entirely correct, but it's okay. So it will tell you about the person, comes natural to Laila to make hand motions. I don't know what they're talking about. When speaking to Laila, emphasize the future, how to win my trust, what I'm motivated by when working with me, and so on. And really interestingly, you can also download this for Crystal or for Chrome, your browser, and then you can go on different kinds of social media, and there'll be this little button that says View Personality before you go into the meeting with that person. And it will allow you to prepare your meeting way better because you know how the person is going to be. You can also send an email, and there are all these standard emails. And if you say who you're sending it to, right, it will customize to that person's profile. Right? So there's really not a reason no more to not customize, right? If you can digitize it, you can customize it. Okay? I'm going to, just for the AV, I'm going to go 2 minutes over. I apologize. So I want to share this also. Do Better can be in any kind of thing, right? So these guys, this is based in Copenhagen. We have more people biking to work than driving in a car every day. So this bridge is actually made so all the bikers can easily go. They save, I think, like 5 kilometers by building this bridge. And it also makes them feel better, which is the next one I'll go to, because it has this nice view and it's orange and it's nice. Right? So feel better. What is the internet full of? Cats and dogs. Thank you. Right? So I think the cats and dogs of the future are the robots, right? Because they are going to, this is Pepper and Jibo. They will understand our facial recognitions. They'll know how we, how we react if we're sad or whatever. They'll tell us, right? We're already using robots to make us feel better in different ways. This is a robot called Paro. It's a very sort of soft, nice robot. And we'll use it when kids have to go into surgery, or in disaster areas, or for dementia patients, right? So we're already using robots to make us feel better. This is a hospital, one of my favorite cases. So imagine your child has to go into, let's imagine this room is all white, right? It's all white. You have to take your child and you say to your child, now, honey, you just have to go into this tube. It's going to be really cold and you're going to have to lie in there. Not many kids really want to do that. Not many adults want to do that either. Right? So 80% of all kids in a white room have to get some kind of medicine to sleep, right, or relax. So they painted this room like this. Now only 20% of the kids have to get some sort of this sedative, right? So it's such a small thing. So what is the very small thing you can do in your business to make people feel better that can have a dramatic impact on your business, right? And so I'll skip this one, but I'll go to this one. So we all also want to look better. And look better was about social status and social capital. Facebook is really good at that, right? But I'll give you one example of a company that I think uses this look better in a way to make their people kind of comply with the rules that they have. So does any of you guys rent out, is Airbnb? You have Airbnb? Anybody rent out on Airbnb? Yeah? Do we have any super hosts in the room? Super host? Yes, we have a super host here, a couple over there. Awesome. What does it take to be a super host? You have to answer really fast. You have to have a lot of people stay at your place. You have to get a lot of 5-point ratings. You have to not cancel. Basically, you have to comply with what Airbnb really wants you to do. If you do that, they will make you look better by enhancing your profile on their website. So what can you do in your business to make people comply with what you want them to, and then give them a better social status? Those are principles to think about. So I want to leave you with a couple of things here. So when we talk about these extraordinary customer experience and be really human in this exponential technological world, we have to think about that it's never about us. People don't buy their product because of us. We kind of think that, but that's not how it is. It's also not because we have a really cool organization. It's also not because we have some sort of cool technology. And it's kind of sad to think about because we really want it to be about us, but it's not. It is always about how we can make people be, do, feel, and look better. That is always why they want to give us their time, their attention, and ultimately their money. It's because we make them be, do, feel, and or look better. So I encourage you all to go home, look at the massive opportunities you have to create new, bold, wonderful offerings. If you target some of those global grand challenges and turn them into massive opportunities, you can, each and every one of you, positively impact the world. And I hope that's what you spend your time on. Thank you very much. All right, thank you.